All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers media network. Dan, one of your hosts here, and if it's my voice at the top, it's most likely one of our wonderful match previews. That's right, and we're getting you a little bit of a Saturday drop, a Saturday special, because Chelsea are taking on West Ham. That's right. Another London derby back to back with a huge 3 points on the line against the Hammers. And if it's a match preview, it is always Sam, CFC Central, joining me to break down the opposition, to take a look at some of the questions Pochettino is going to have to answer and which players might get into some tricky situations and who might be the heroes of the match. But Sam, we're recording this the day after Chelsea dismantled, destroyed, debilitated one Tottenham Hotspur, dragging them back away from Champions League qualification, as we only know how to do oh so well ourselves. But how are you feeling with that result in mind and with four fixtures remaining in this Premier League season?
Well, I don't know about you, Dan, but the a couple of hours after you roast hot spuds, it just smells delicious. So for me, I'm still reveling in all kinds of delight. Obviously, spoiling their top four hopes being the double whammy, but yeah, it's been great. I feel like I was surprisingly optimistic. We discussed this before the pod about this game, and we played really, really well. When we've talked about turning points, I feel like this one sort of features pretty highly in terms of where I would want the ideal performance to be, because there were just so many great individual performances, great focus, didn't lose the clean sheet, looked like it was solid all the way through. And obviously, when you sprinkle on top a little bit of Cobham magic, a couple of debuts to come on in a big game and show that they're up and ready for the fight, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better. So, absolutely chuffed to bits with that. And long may that continue against another London side in a couple of days.
Yeah, a side that has one more match played than us, who is now behind us in the table. We'd absolutely love to take the victory, get 3 more points, and keep the European dream for next season alive. But before we get into our match preview here, just getting our admin on the way. As always, thanking everybody who supports the podcast, the amazing group of viewers, listeners, and supporters who all enjoy the content. If you haven't yet, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Helps people find the show and is always appreciated and completely free. You also can subscribe on YouTube, where we've done some live streams recently, and maybe we'll do one or two more before the end of the season. You also can hit the bell icon there to get notified when we drop a new video, and like and comment on the videos. Always appreciated. You can join our free weekly newsletter. That's right. Sam, who's joining me on this episode, writes them. They're magical. They're wonderful. They're free. This week's was on Thiago Silva. It was exceptional. I can't imagine what next week is going to be about yet. So if you want to know right when it drops, sign up for that free newsletter. And you can join our free or paid version of our Discord community too, to get into the conversation with some like-minded Chelsea supporters. But we are going to shift gears and start talking about West Ham, who currently sit on 49 points, ninth in the Premier League table, a spot formerly occupied by Chelsea, with a record of 13, 10, and 12. Their home record, 6-8-4, 26 points. Away record, 7-2-8, 23 points. They have scored 56 goals. That's a total of 1.6 per game. Goals against, 65, letting in about 1.86 per game, -9 goal difference. Last match was a 2-2 draw in the league against Liverpool, but before that, they lost 5-2 to West Ham, and that was after a draw against Leverkusen at home, which was the second part of their two-leg Europa League quarterfinal. They ended up losing 1-3 on aggregate. They also lost to Fulham 2-0. And then before that was probably a better run of fixtures than what they've seen recently, where they beat Wolves 2-1. They had a 1-1 draw with Tottenham. They had a crazy 4-3 game against Newcastle, where Newcastle ended up winning. And then they did draw Aston Villa 1-1. So Sam, I mean, they've had an ability to at least maintain pace with some of the top sides in the Premier League this season. We can look at Aston Villa, look at the Tottenham draw, look at the Liverpool draw. They've been able to manufacture a couple results, but then they also have had some interesting banana peels, right? The Crystal Palace match, the Fulham match. What do you make of this side? And just maybe how would you sum them up before we get into how they've been playing and the players who are going to be available or unavailable?
That's an interesting one. I might get a little bit of pushback for this, but I would say that it's quite similar to the Thomas Tuchel situation post the UEFA Champions League, where, obviously great title. Everybody was elated with the result and getting a European title to West Ham. But after that, obviously Declan Rice was sold. A lot of friction between Moyes and the fans, a section of the fans obviously saying that the quality that you have in the side versus the football that you're serving up, it's not congruent. We should be doing better. We should be playing like, European champions, so to say. But that's been the biggest disconnect. I feel like people are expecting them to take a step up, but it doesn't look like they've made that. And they're also looking at a lot of managerial candidates. So they're in limbo. I don't think they themselves believe they can grab a European spot because their form's been all over the place. A lot of individuals are either declining or sort of, I don't know, easing away and falling apart in terms of trying to keep their levels up. A lot of them who were doing very well under Moyes a couple of seasons ago. And obviously the squad's just like good players like Michael Antonio are sort of like moving towards the twilight of their career, inconsistent. I hope I don't jinx it, but yeah, I mean, it's just it doesn't seem like in the short term there's quite a lot to be optimistic about. But they've got a really good sporting director in Tim Steidten, and they've been linked with some very good coaches. So it does look like maybe next season they will revamp and they will have to spend a little bit of money while selling another key asset. The Declan Rice money is still there. So yeah, but for now, I think it's a very inconsistent side with a lot of question marks who are clearly struggling, and probably one of the worst sides on the form table. So hoping Charity FC doesn't turn up, and we can, ride that momentum wave and make it count again.
We would much rather be on the receiving side of some charity in this match rather than on the giving side of charity this late in the season, particularly as we look above us at Newcastle and United, and would love to see Chelsea ascend into sixth place between now and the end of the season. When it comes to injuries, Chelsea a lot, West Ham barely any. It feels as if you'll at least get a full strength West Ham side, Sam, that we get to play against, even though a full strength West Ham side, as you maybe mentioned, is not necessarily one of the stronger sides in the Premier League this year.
Absolutely. And I do think they have a near clean bill of health for this one. I was watching the press conference for the game, and David Moyes said that Naya Faged will be out. He's not recovered in time. He's actually a very good defender. Came from League One and plays for Morocco. Had a pretty good World Cup as well. So lots of quality this season. Has again been inconsistent, like West Ham in general. So he's out. I think he's going to be a bit of a miss. And the other centre back that they were missing up until now, Konstantinos Mavropanos, the ex-Arsenal defender, he's back, although we don't know whether he's going to start. And a lot of their issues have also come in the back line in terms of just quality of defending, which we'll talk about in the weaknesses. So having at least one of those guys back may sort of give them a boost. But at this point, I do feel like, no matter who you put into the lineup, it's still going to be a very unpredictable side. But you look at our list, and yeah, it's 14 injuries now. That's more than half the squad. So I don't think we have any wiggle room for changes and making quality substitutions. Obviously, great to see, Achampong and Torainen come on and get their debuts. But in terms of making game-changing subs, I think Cassidy is the only one we have on the bench. There are some rumors that Nkunku and a couple of others may feature off the bench, maybe there, who knows? But at this point in the season, you want to be a little careful. So I'm hoping, it doesn't cost us.
Yeah, plenty of considerations for who might feature, but it feels like not much that Pochettino can do except hope and pray and just get as many lemons as possible situated through Cobham to try to will his players back to fitness before this fixture coming very, very quickly after the midweek match. But we're going to take our first ad break. When we get back, we're going to talk about how West Ham have been getting on under David Moyes in their little bit of a slow crawl to the end of this season. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, Sam. So you know how it goes. We like to lay out the landscape. We want to give listeners, viewers, and supporters a chance to understand how this West Ham side has been getting on since Chelsea had played them previously. We know that David Moyes very close to the end of his time, the end of his tenure at West Ham, with all of the links and rumors to new managers. So it may be one of the last times that Chelsea faces a David Moyes side in West Ham. So let's let the people know how they've been looking, particularly as they really struggle in their wind down.
Yeah, lot to dissect and sort of analyze here. But yeah, I think things have changed since the first time we met them in the reverse fixture. So that was the second game of the season. And yeah, we that was the first defeat of our PL campaign. So not quite good memories. That was also the game where Moises Caicedo made his debut, had a horrific time, despite coming off the bench and gave away a penalty. So not quite one that we remember for auspicious reasons. So I would firmly like to correct that in this fixture. But like I said, I think the discontentment in the fan base has just come from form worsening, from quality dropping. Uh, just to give you context, Dan, they've won two of their last 12 games and one of their last eight, and that was against Wolves. And in 10 games this season across all competitions, they've conceded 3 goals or more. For a side that's pretty reliant on being compact and trying to ensure that you're using transitions as your token of currency to score, doesn't really make for good reading. So I think that's where it's gone wrong for them. Haven't been able to shore up their defense, and they've scored a lot. They're, I think, about 8 or 9 goals behind us. But again, water sort of flooded, pour out defense has just like made it super difficult for them to be higher up the table. And I think that's why the European slots are under threat. But if I had to just give you a little bit of an essence of what they're all about, like I mentioned, extremely transition heavy side. They depend almost solely on being in a mid block or a low block, and from there they will try to explode, win the ball back, and go directly towards the opposition goal. In an attacking sense, it's a attack which is well built and well suited to this kind of situation. So you look at Jared Bowen and you look at Mo Kudus, both of them very direct attackers, very good at running at defenders, 1v1, pretty wily customers. Kudus, I think, has been one of the signings of the season. Great returns on his attacking output, so he's been superb. The only issue being that both are left-footed guys who prefer being on the right-hand side. So it's sort of like a Madueke Palmer situation there, where they haven't figured out, how to sort of maximize their attack. But Kudus has slotted in on the left, and he's done really well there as well. So it's been great for them. Mikhail Antonio, I mentioned slightly before in the podcast, aging, maybe becoming a little less effective, but still a potent threat. He's their one man, army up front. He will try to compete for every single long ball. He'll chase them down no matter what, and he'll try and link up with the guys behind him. So it's just an attack built for route one, direct football, trying to get your ball from your back six to your front four as quickly as possible, bypassing all press, all pressure, all players as quickly as you can. So that's the one. I've tried sort of analyzing their attack and how it looks, but they just don't show enough of sustained possession to be able to say, okay, this is how it works. But yeah, it's a side that exclusively likes to play on the break, and that's going to be I think the biggest challenge for us, we've struggled a little bit in defensive transition. So yeah, it will be, quite an interesting game, because when they do like to attack, they also push Thomas Suchek, who's the defensive midfielder, into the box, and he's a towering presence. And then you've got Vladimir Sufal and Emerson Palmieri, obviously ex-Chelsea. Both of them will get on their bikes and try to bomb down and put crosses into the box. So that's the gist of it. Transition heavy side will look to attack back to front, get tall guys in there. They've got some nice physical presence in Kurtzuma, in Suchek, and try to score off headers. So yeah.
And I think one of the things that you would look at too is that this West Ham side doesn't like to press too much, which we've seen some good and some bad about our ability to handle teams that like to press more aggressively. And I think there would be the challenge of the low block that they would like to maybe set up as well to disperse the responsibility for defending across more members of their side.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And I would like to say that it's, I think, a conscious strategy from their end, because obviously they know that, they're not going to be reliant on technical players to retain the ball against stronger sides. They're not interested in possession. So what they usually do is they will ease off as quickly as possible into a mid block. They do press sometimes, and that's just, I would say, according to game state. So if, for example, they're trailing and the opposition side says, okay, I'm going to make you run for the ball, and they'll just keep it, then obviously Antonio will press. Owen will press sometimes. Paqueta will also press in a 4-2-3-1, in a 4-1-4-1, and they will try to get bodies there to provoke some kind of a response. But usually, especially against sides um, bigger than them, better suited to possession football than them, they will sit back and they will just wait, usually in a 4-1-4-1. And the idea here, Dan, is that they have some good central midfield players. So you have Thomas Suchek or James Ward-Prowse, one of those two, and Lucas Paqueta, who's now almost starting on a regular for Brazil. So those two guys are going to sit in front of Edson Alvarez, another player who was linked with the Chelsea move, almost made it when he was at Ajax, but didn't quite get to sign the coveted contract. So those three players will essentially try to block off central access. You'll see those two guys in front shuffle across, try to cut passing lanes, and Alvarez will try to basically pick any player dropping into the pockets in between the defensive line, and they'll try to win the ball from there and go back to front as quickly as possible. When that phase of play is done, when the balls move to the attacking third or West Ham's defensive third, then they go into this very, very difficult to break, watertight low block. So they'll push Alvarez, who has actually transitioned from a centre back to DM. So he will be into the back line. And sometimes when they're under sustained pressure, Suchek also drops. So it's almost like a 6-4-0 or a 6-3-1 at times, and it's just about trying to force the opposite team to go wide. So the only situation that you have is to go to the left wing, to the right wing, and keep crossing over and over again to try and breach it. But when you've got West Ham's height, altitude, and aggression in the air, then there's a very good chance that not going to get any change whatsoever. So I was watching the Liverpool game to analyze their style of play, and Liverpool put in 32 crosses and 8 of them found their mark. And I don't think any of those shots were on target. So just to give you this context, if you're crossing too much during the game, then it is 100% guaranteed that our game plan is not coming off, and we've just come back to the strategy of that early season strategy of just put it into the box and see what happens, which is not what you want to do against West Ham, because the more you lose the ball, the more they'll try to win the ball back and go back to front, and then it's going to cause all kinds of issues. And yeah, when we talk about height, when we talk about altitude, I also want to mention that they have, in my opinion, one of the best set piece takers in the world, James Ward-Prowse. And you have to be very mindful that they will play for corners, they will play for free kicks in and around the box. So if he does start, if he's in there, then please be careful. Don't just do what Alfie Gilchrist did against Heung-Min Son. Don't be clumsy. try and get the ball away like neatly and with a little bit of patience, with a little bit of calm, because the last thing you want is conceding from a set piece, which is exactly what we did in the reverse fixture for that opening goal. So let's not make the same mistake again. But that's the gist of it, Dan. I think it's just going to be one of those teams that we've struggled against all season. And unless you're quick and unless you're able to put a solid game plan that involves breaking them down through the center where they're weak, you're going to be just stuck crossing and spamming into, a defense with four pillars. And it's not going to reap a lot of dividends with guys like Nico Jackson and Mudrik and Madueke in that front line. So that's what the challenge is. Can we break a low block team at home, not get frustrated and concede a couple of clumsy goals on the break? So if we have to convert the momentum that we've gathered into something better, this is where it has to start. Will be a good building point come next season.
Yeah, makes sense in that regard. When we take a look at where the weaknesses are, and in a side that maybe is in as poor a form as West Ham have been, with a little bit of a downward trajectory as they look to close out their season as well. What's cropping up most regularly on their list of top problems that are just not maybe addressable through any type of training or through the personnel that they have available?
Yeah, I think one of them has been a mixture of form plus personnel issues. So just the quality of defending from individual standpoint, from collective standpoint, seems to have just evaporated out of nowhere. They have no clean sheets in the last 9 games. They have two clean sheets in their last 22. So that just speaks volumes about how difficult it has been for them to be, absolutely robust where it matters. And like I mentioned, the loss of two centre backs, both of them signed in the past year and a half, I think 2 years for Agad. Um, that sort of has thrown a spanner in the works because they've now had to rely on Angelo Okpona, who's a bit of a veteran. They've had to reshuffle a lot. When Agad was playing, he did have a good impact in the side, then to put like really good performances, very comfortable defending out wide. So obviously makes them a better side. But I think those two guys missing has just made them much, much worse. So I don't expect both of them to feature. One is definitely out, the other might not start. So here's to hoping that we get to, you know, rub a little bit of salt into their wounds before they get both those guys back. The second I would like to say is I think, like I mentioned, if you want to break them down centrally, then instead of the wide players, you might have to think of how to exploit that 4-1-4-1. And the best way to do that is something that Crystal Palace managed to do. And their new manager, Oliver Glasner, so his formation is what we used to play under Thomas Tuchel, which was a 3-4-2-1. And what made it interesting, Dan, is Mateta, Jean-Philippe Mateta, Crystal Palace's forward, was used to sort of pin West Ham's centre backs and two really, really good players, Michael Olise and Eberechi Eze. Both of them were used in this narrow half space roles, so very close to Mateta, able to link up with each other in close proximity under heavy, heavy pressure. And West Ham couldn't handle, sorry, West Ham just couldn't, stop them in any way. They were, I think, 4-0 down by the 30-minute mark. They were struggling to put any kind of attacking moves together. And that was all down to Olise and Eze just running riot. They were playing these little balls from central to out wide. And that all comes from exploiting Edson Alvarez as the lone pivot. If you're able to cross or have enough quality to go past that first line of pressure, those four behind the central forward, Mikhail Antonio. If you get to those pockets on either side of Alvarez, I think that's where the joy could be. So maybe some kind of a system that stretches their back line a little bit and opens up that gap for pocket players to exploit. Somebody like a Cole Palmer is very good between lines, and especially because I think Madueke, after his really, really good appearance, is going to start again on the right hand side. this might be the game to push him closer to Jackson. Make sure that you're utilizing that space and time around Alvarez and open up maybe the other slot for one of the other guys to try and give Alvarez all sorts of trouble. So if you can do that, if you can force their backline to move out of their comfort zone, that's where you can destroy them. The Crystal Palace game ended 5-2. Manchester City sort of exploited it in a little different way. So yeah, I think that sort of lends itself very well to West Ham's weaknesses. They like to be compact in the center, but if you manage to find a way through, lots of damage to be done.
Well, that's going to do it for taking a look at the West Ham side. But we're going to take our last ad break when we get back, talking about the list of challenges that Mauricio Pochettino has walking into this fixture as Chelsea look to maximize on the available points remaining in this Premier League season. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. So Sam, we mentioned it earlier. 14 injuries, fatigue for Cole Palmer, lots of problems for Mauricio Pochettino to handle and deal with when it comes to how he's going to set up this side. Very short, very quick turnaround time from the Thursday evening fixture to the Sunday match. Not maybe necessarily the options he would hope for on the bench or in his starting 11. It feels as if maybe it's already preordained who is going to start in this regard due to all the injuries, even if there's the maybe Nkunku comes back for a 5-minute cameo at the end of the match. It does feel as if you could just lift and shift the lineup as long as everybody is, I guess, not falling down from the Tottenham match and copy and pasting it into the lineup generator.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our hands are tied for this one. So Poch is just basically, I think the subs are forced upon him. His team selection is forced upon him. Luckily, we were able to make some kind of a positive out of it with some very, very good performances. But again, I worry about the quick turnaround time. You and I were again speaking about this earlier on. And whenever we've had a grueling encounter, the 4-3 against United, for example, which was an exhilarating win, after that, we just, fell apart in a game that we were supposed to do well. So it doesn't count, as a valid reason for a lot of people because, they say, okay, what happens when you play Conference League? I mean, you're traveling all the way to Azerbaijan to play some club, and then you have to come back after a Thursday and then play again on Saturday. How are you going to cope? Which is fair. But again, if you look at somebody like a Cole Palmer, um, in his senior career, before this season, his most minutes played were like 900 minutes over the entirety of the season. And in this season alone, I think he's crossed 2,000 easy. So that's been the jump. And if you look at Cole Palmer's performance last game, he was strangely one of the guys who was more subdued. Not sort of, being in the thick of things. Usually everything runs through him, but it was actually the fresher guys, like Mudryk, like Madueke, who were providing these little jolts of electricity. And Palmer just looked like he was comfortable doing the basics, even when he was pressing, not his usual self, no interceptions, which he usually is very, very good at. So I think those little things might escalate, especially in a game which is immediately after such an important fixture. So I wish we had time to rotate, wish we had the depth to give and manage minutes better, but I don't think that's a choice for this one. So the best thing to do is like put in a very strong performance and know that there are 6 days before we meet Nottingham Forest for the next one. So hopefully that will be at the back of our minds and we can push through this one to get there.
If we think about what worked well in the Tottenham match, one of the things we saw was a really strong performance from Marc Cucurella in the inverted fullback role. Do you feel like that's something that we'll get a chance to see again and would work well against this West Ham side? And, that would produce some type of net positive if he can maintain that, 2 matches back to back?
Yeah, I did love the segment in the review pod where you guys called him Air Force One and paid tribute to a really good performance. I felt like he's, I mean, obviously it does hide his inability to do the fullback role to its full extent, You don't quite see him bombing up front a lot. He's surprisingly doing it a lot more than he used to do at Brighton, but he's not got, I would say, a lot of the requisites for being like an elite fullback, the ability to go both ways, his body orientation and how he picks angles, it's just very limited. But in those central positions, because he's played as a midfielder before he came to the Premier League, it just shows you he's got a different skill set. He's also able to shore up a little bit of that center, make sure that Caicedo has a lot less space to cover in transition. So, yeah, I think this would be an interesting one because West Ham's major threat is down the right hand side. So, if Kukureya is central, and if he makes the kind of runs that he did against Tottenham, which was getting into the box by underlapping, then there is a chance he leaves Jared Bowen up against Benoit Badiashile, which is not a matchup that you want your centre back to go up against. So there will be some mind given by Poch, or should be given by him, saying that, okay, if Kuku is playing slightly central, then is Bowen, is Kudus, going to be in that situation where they're able to get 1v1 with your centre back. And if that's going to be the case, then you might as well just let him play a more defensive role and figure out how you can maximize something else. So that's one that I will definitely keep an eye on. I do think there are other things that I've seen in games that naturally lend us our strategy to sort of work against West Ham. So I was watching Liverpool, and something they did really well. Two things. One was just going with long switches to Luis Diaz, and I think that was to isolate Diaz against what they think, or what a lot of people think is the weak link in this West Ham side. It's so far at right back. And if you get 1v1 without, say, Kudus or Bowen dropping back to offer support, and if Alvarez can't cover that space, then you effectively have, the facilities to take him 1v1 and cause a lot of damage. Jeremy Doku did it to some devastating extent when City were playing against him, and that was a matchup where Doku was feasting and just absolutely thriving on every single opportunity he got. So if Mudrik wants an opponent where he has the ability to go either way and give them a lot of trouble, this one would be it. So I would definitely put my money on that one. I would have also loved somebody like an Nkunku, because Liverpool, what they did really well was they obviously didn't have a centre forward in their lineup. So Cody Gakpo played as the guy up front, and what Gakpo did was he essentially functioned like a drifting forward. So he ended up on the right wing. Sometimes he drifted on the left. And what this did was it forced Kurt Zuma and a lot of West Ham centre backs to constantly step out to try and close that space that the centre forward tried to get in those spaces. And when that happened, then Luis Diaz and even Alexis McAllister from midfield tried to run in behind. And there were, I think, 6 or 7 times where Alexander Arnold just played long balls over the top after one of West Ham centre backs were drawn out. And you found McAllister in the box, you found Diaz in the box. They should have scored at least a couple of goals from there. They didn't. Had a bad day in front of goal, but that strategy tends to work. And I think something we saw in preseason with Jackson and Nkunku working really well, that would have been ideal. I've also seen Cole Palmer do some off the ball stuff. Mason Mount was doing it really well for us. I think if Palmer can develop that aspect of his play, if he can be elusive without the ball and end up in those situations where he's running beyond Jackson and getting 1v1 with the goalkeeper, I think that would be the next step in its evolution, and this would be a nice game to start. So make sure Jackson's, giving all kinds of headaches to Zuma and whoever his centre back partner is. And if and when you get the opportunity for Mudrik, for Madueke, for Palmer, run beyond and try to get 1v1 with the goalkeeper and Caicedo or whoever it is, the centre back, try finding those long balls in behind before West Ham go into their low block. So I think that strategy, like both those things, work out really, really well for us.
Another player that we threw some praise on after the result against Tottenham was young Alfie Gilchrist, who is just loving life playing for Chelsea at the moment. And I think he's someone we talked about a few weeks ago, Sam, and this idea of the next man up with the injuries that Chelsea have been facing, that there was going to be an opportunity for at minimum one of the Cobham Academy graduates this season to get some minutes heading into the end of the season. You look at Alfie Gilchrist now, he had 84 minutes in the match against Tottenham. He had a less stellar 78 minutes. To be fair, though, everyone had less stellar minutes in that match against Arsenal. He had a cameo in the three matches prior to that, or the three other matches in the Everton match, the Manchester United match, 16 minutes and 3 minutes for the two, and then 4 minutes against Burnley. He's currently sitting at 205 minutes in the Premier League this season on two total starts and 10 matches played. With four matches remaining, with questions about Malo Gusto's fitness heading into the end of the season here, as well as Reece James, maybe thinking about how to get both of them ready for next season, it feels like you could see a world where Alfie Gilchrist might be able to pick up one, two, maybe even four close to 90s in terms of total minutes between now and the end of the season, which would be a stellar way to close out the year for him.
Yeah, there were a lot of things I loved about Alfie's performance. The first one was that he didn't really get off to the best start. And there was this moment in the first half where he tried to follow Son into the attacking half, and Son basically flipped him and tried to run in behind. And usually, when young players go through that, when they've made like a high profile error, the reaction tells you everything. But after that, he was so switched on, and again, I referenced the review board because I really liked the analysis there in terms of what he did right. And it was just easing Son into positions from where he could do absolutely no damage. Whenever he was coming inside, following him in, not giving him a space to shoot, which is quite a thing because Son is 2-footed and he's very, very good with finishing off idle foot. So you want to be razor sharp with him. You don't want to give him any space to breathe because he will make you pay. And there were also these little snippets where, in terms of Richarlison to get away from our centre backs, tried to go far post to try and head the ball. And there were these three or four moments where Gilchrist was always switched on. He was always switched on to that far post cross, and he just shuffled in front of Son, in front of Richarlison to head the ball away and make sure that nothing was given on the far post. It's something that Colville has struggled with. It's something that more experienced centre backs like Badiashile have struggled with, and he was there fully switched on to every single thing that was going on there. So quite incredible. I feel like he's got some valuable experience in his belt now to make that count. So yeah, if, in terms of when you're saying should he be given more minutes, I absolutely think so. I feel like you should be counting on him as much as possible. I also think that in this game in particular, in a side which has some really, really good aerial athletes, some very good aerial presence, you could do with an extra centre back in your back line. And you have the reason to say that my hands are tied. I can't really put anyone else except Josh Achimpong, but this might come a little too soon for him. Obviously, he's also some unit. Like, I saw his height, and he was towering over Pochettino. So I was like, Jesus, this is a tall right back. But yeah, Gilchrist seems like he's accustomed and acclimatized to the physical requirements of the PL, and he's doing well. So this game might just benefit him in a lot of ways. Obviously, we'll be up against another frightening attacker in Kudus, and it'll be interesting to see how well he does. So good challenge for him to have. And if you are competing and you want those young players to have a good loan should he go out next season, then those are the challenges that he needs to tick off before a good club comes in and says he's starting for us next season, no doubt.
And maybe remaining on defenders who have graduated from Cobham for a moment, we also can talk about Trev Chalobah's Premier League man of the match performance against Tottenham too. Thinking about this match against West Ham and into the end of the season, I know you're getting ready to start having the conversation for us to start recording the transfer window specials that usually run from June all the way through August. What are your thoughts about Trev's importance to the side and if you were advising any one or any of the multiple members of Chelsea's recruitment department, what would your recommendation be around Trev Chalobah heading into the summer?
Find your money elsewhere. Simple. I don't care.
Ooh, I
Your
love it.
books,
I love
you
it.
know,
Go get
yeah,
another line of credit.
yeah, genuinely, like, sell another hotel. I don't know, create something else to sell to whatever. I don't care. But I genuinely think, and this is, I don't think beyond debate, that he's been the most solid centre back we've had this season. That's beyond any doubt at all. Levi has again been in a difficult situation where he's not had enough minutes, but he's also had to play left back. But purely by virtue of how things have metamorphosized, by purely being there, he's been, transformative presence. And I've had my issues with Trev in terms of, focus issues when he was playing next to the likes of Rudiger or Christensen. And I was like, he needs to focus better. He doesn't have to make those silly mistakes. But this season, he's stepped up. And he also mentioned this in the post game where he was asked about, you are being trusted with a leadership position now. So do you think that's the next step in your evolution? And he said, yes, I think that's exactly the next step I need to take. I need to, hold responsibility and take accountability with the back line. He also gave credit to Thiago Silva, saying that playing next to him is learning a lot in terms of how to marshal a defense. And if a player is showing that level of responsibility, if he's stepping up in a big game, and playing for his boyhood club and scoring against one of the most historically bitter rivals there, you have to keep him. And I don't think when you look at somebody like an Usman Diomande or like an Antonio Silva for 90, 80 million, they are that big an upgrade over somebody who has something more to play for than them. So my message would be absolutely crystal clear. You know, keep Chalobah because he is arguably your strongest and most available right centre back going forward. Keep Conor Gallagher. Find your money elsewhere.
It's interesting, particularly with the Trev shouts, is that, if there were someone like Thiago Silva had been healthy and, Benoit Badiashile had been healthy, you also have seen him over the last season occasionally deputize in that right back role too and have some fun there as well. So I think the other benefit with keeping someone like Trev Chalobah, there is a lot of positional flexibility across that back line, whether in a 4 or a 3 as a center back in either position or as a auxiliary right back. He does give you a lot of options, which I think is another thing from a squad building composition heading into next summer that can't be undersold when you think about whoever you bring in to replace him, will they have that same level of ability and flexibility to play across multiple spots in our back line?
He also plays defensive midfield. I should just add this. He's not been obviously given the chance. Multiple times people ask Thomas Tuchel saying, when Kante is injured and when Kovacic is injured and when Jorginho is not doing well, can you trust Trevor Chalobah? And he said, probably a young player shouldn't be asked to switch positions this often because he did play at right back. But I also think that he's somebody, if given, entrusted with the responsibility to do it, he would do it. So I literally don't see any downsides in keeping him. I feel like for 40 million, he would cover two positions comfortably, and he's better than Axel Disasi this season. And I mentioned this even before the season started. I felt like going from Trev to Disasi was like a sideways move. There are some things that you get to the Disasi, which is like aerial dominance. He's extremely good in the air. But after watching like a couple of the line breaking passes that Trev was doing against Tottenham, how well he reacts to even like the ones that he misses and how calm and composed he looks. People focus on the goal, but I think like the best moment he had was this moment where Kukureya stepped out and Johnson got beyond and he found Papsar in the middle of the box for a shot on goal. And Trev basically threw himself, it hit his knee and went for a corner. And Kukureya was behind him, basically thumping him on his back, saying, brilliantly done, because that was almost certainly a goal. So I think he scored two effectively against Spurs. And if you're putting that kind of commitment and that kind of dedication to your craft, and if you're stepping up above the other options who haven't been under the same amount of scrutiny, then obviously it raises the question, who are you keeping and why are you letting this person go? So I absolutely think that it's a no-brainer for me. Even as a squad option, I've always said this about Korn as well. I'm not saying start him every single game. I'm saying give him a fair chance to play for his club, and he'll show you what it means. Every single Real Madrid squad that has a Cristiano Ronaldo, that has a Gareth Bale, that has a Modric, also has, Lucas Vasquez. They have, a Nacho. Can Real Madrid not upgrade on those positions? Of course they can. But those players know what it's like to play for your club,
Sure.
and they always have something more. And when the times are not good and the salaries, the joy of getting a huge wage wears out and you're tired of the city, it's the guys who were born there, guys who sat in East Upper with their family watching Chelsea since they were like 4 years old. That's when those people get up and stand to be counted. So that's what it means.
Well, what a great thing to end any episode, which is talking about three Academy graduates in Alfie Gilchrist, Trev Chalobah, and Connor Gallagher, and their importance to this Chelsea side, and hopefully trying to send some positive vibes in their way as it relates to their Chelsea future, particularly in a summer where a lot of things feel like will be up for consideration. But one thing that should not be up for consideration is Chelsea doing their damnness to win against West Ham this weekend so they can pick up all 3 points. As we mentioned at the top, keep the European hopes alive. Really, Europa League. We'd like to be in Europa League, not Conference League. But that's going to do for this episode. So hopefully you've enjoyed this preview. If you have, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave a 5-star review. Join us on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, and also hit the bell icon to get notified. Sign up for that free weekly newsletter. You've heard Sam on this episode talk about many things. He's wonderfully intelligent, absolutely bright, and a phenomenal person. And it makes him sad when you don't do it. So sign up for free to get that in your inbox every single week, and then hop in our Discord community for some amazing conversations, free or paid, with our great community of like-minded Chelsea supporters. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, keep the blue flag flying high.